Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending today's webinar. I'm David Shaw, the Publishing Director for Family Business Magazine. I hope that you and your family members and your employees are and remain in good health. Whether you're running a family business or managing a single-family, multifamily, or embedded family office, you can improve operations and your future outlook by embracing digital transformation in bigger ways. And that will be the focus of a variety of topics, including simplifying investment management, looking at reporting for multiple shareholders, using business intelligence to identify new business opportunities, and engaging employees and family members by automating manual processes and facilitating real-time collaboration. We'll specifically examine the challenges to investing in and enhancing your digital technology. So joining me today is John Silvani, who's the president and CEO of Gravity Software. Gravity has a cloud-based multi-entity accounting software approach, a SaaS approach, which makes it easy to manage transactions, approvals, and reporting for multiple companies within a single system. John has more than 35 years of experience in the software industry, including expertise with Microsoft ERP, CRM, and business intelligence solutions. His background in leadership has provided him with an understanding of the demands and needs for growing organizations, and he's going to discuss those today. So I would like to welcome John. John, here you go, and turn this over to you to get us started.
David, thank you. And I want to thank everybody for taking some time to come on the webinar. We appreciate it. So we have a fairly simple agenda, as you can see. We're going to talk about some of the challenges to family offices adopting technology and embracing technology more, as we talk about some of the subjects, as David brought up, about managing and communicating your investment portfolios and information like that. And of course, at the end, we're going to have a Q&A, but feel free during this presentation to post your questions, as you think of them, because we don't want you to forget. So with that, we'll start a little bit here. Just want to talk for a second about the difference between what we see as the mission behind a family office and a commercial business. So a family office obviously is here to preserve wealth, grow wealth, and manage those assets for multi-generational families in most cases, versus a commercial business, and their objectives are really increase market share, create efficiency and increase profits, beat the competition. So we can see that there's very different type of processes and different objectives in a family office. By the way, I started working with family offices and technology more than 20 years ago. The first family office that I actually helped automate was called Ford Estates. They're the family office for the Ford family from Ford Motor Company. And so they actually adopted technology very early on, before family offices were actually an industry. So I've been working with family offices since, and our company Gravity Software, we work with a lot of family offices as part of our client mix. With COVID-19, we saw that many people had time to start to make some changes and adopt some new technologies. So just kind of want to bring you up to speed with where some of the family offices have taken themselves to over the last few years. Now, as you can see, there's been quite a good adoption of technology, but on the other side of that, you can see that, less than 50% in many cases have not really made advances in adopting technology. And we want to talk about some of the challenges, again, to why a family office may not be able to, or may not be perceived able to adopt technology that can actually help them maintain better communications and just better overall information for their family members. One of the first challenges we've seen in our practice working with family offices is security. We have a lot of organizations that, they basically want to be private. They don't want people to know any information about the family, their investments, and wealth, and so on. And we can respect that. That obviously is something that's very personal to the family. But one of the things that holds people back from adopting technology, especially the newer technology trends of cloud-based technology, is the fact that we're fearful that people will see or be able to have access to our information. If we take it out of the closet and put it in the cloud, so to speak, that maybe there's that possibility that somebody can actually hack into that and see that. So let's talk about that for a second. I want to do a poll here and see kind of how many family offices that are on today are using some basis of cloud technology.
So I'm going to be pushing this poll now out to all of you. Go ahead and answer this. Choose one. So are you using cloud-based services? Yes, for all of your applications. Yes, for email and document storage, such as Dropbox. Yes, for email only, or no. And as soon as you have a chance to respond and get the responses in, I'll be back, John, with the results.
Perfect. And I just want to make a note here that part of this presentation, we're going to use examples of different technology products that can help. We're not here to promote a single product per se, but we're going to use a lot of the products that we work with every day that will give you examples of what is available today. So on a security standpoint, we kind of have two polar opposites. An on-premise where we have, and what we see in a lot of family offices, let's talk from an accounting perspective. They'll have a QuickBooks database or databases on a machine somewhere and feeling that, well, it's locked in an office, nobody has access to it. That's what we would call an on-premise type of scenario. Is there security there? Sure. How good is the security? But we'll talk about that in a second. The other polar opposite is what we call cloud-based service, where we're using services that are managed in a cloud. But I do want to call a distinction between what's called a managed cloud and just a cloud. So a managed cloud is a cloud services like Gmail or Office 365 that are actively managed for security by those respective organizations. They monitor intrusions, they monitor ransomware, they monitor the whole infrastructure. And so what you're really getting with a managed service is not just the service, but you're getting all the capabilities of the organization around that service to make sure it is secure, to make sure that nothing's going to happen and there's no intrusions and so on. So if you're looking at cloud services, I would always say look for a managed cloud service. Now, our platform is on a Microsoft managed cloud. And to give you some examples of what Microsoft does with that cloud is, for example, they back it up every 30 minutes for us. We don't have to do that. They manage the security of intrusions and ransomware. We don't have to worry about that. And of course, Microsoft or Google or many of those organizations have resources well beyond what we can actually muster as an organization. So again, I would highly recommend you always kind of think about the managed side of the cloud services. And I'll stop a second to see, David, if we have any results from the poll.
I think we do. So it looks like we're pretty much an even split, 37.8 and 37.8% between yes, all of our major applications are cloud-based, and yes, email and document storage is cloud-based. It looks like 13.5% email only, and about just a hair under 10.8% no.
And that kind of fits with those demographics we saw just a few slides ago. So that kind of makes sense. So let's talk about an on-premise solution. The first thing, and I always tell people that your on-premise solution is only as good, the security is only as good as the person who's in charge of it. So if, for example, and security not just is intrusions and so on, but it's also disaster recovery and making sure that we have backups and so on. I'll give you a great example. We had a client years ago who actually would back up their system every night, but they put the backups right next to the server. And their thought was, well, if something breaks in the hardware, we'll just take the backup and put it in. What happened one night is they had a break-in, and they took the server and the backup tapes. So they walked in the next morning and there was nothing. So, you're only as good as the policies, procedures, the security of the people that are in charge of that. So really, again, you can't buy the type of services and security normally that you could get in a non-cloud premise. You hear it all the time from people like Microsoft and Google and so on about patching your phones, patching your servers, and so on. And there's a lot of importance to it because that's how they prevent the newer types of attacks. And again, on premise, that's very difficult to do, because you have to stay up with all that technology and so on to be able to do that. And again, I'm going to kind of take you to a second, a cloud versus managed cloud, because a lot of people say, well, I've taken my, let's say, QuickBooks and I've put it in a cloud. Well, if that's not a managed cloud, those servers don't get patched for security. They're not being monitored 24/7 for intrusions. It just happens to be that your storage is somewhere where you can access it remotely easily, but that doesn't mean you have the ability to have all those extra services around it. And I won't go through all of these, but one of the more important ones is also disaster recovery. Think about this. I had a friend who's an insurance agent, and he had his accounting software and his business operations software in his office, and they got a flood. So, and again, power was out and so on. So the first thing is, well, everybody go work from home. Well, that was okay, except for the fact that they couldn't reach their servers. They were out too. So again, putting things in the cloud with a managed service where we have redundancy for internet, we have redundancy for power, we have the ability to even have redundancy at the data center level, meaning that if there is a problem, they handle it and take care of it. On our platform, Microsoft guarantees 99.99% availability of the platform, which again, I could not, in my business pay for that type of availability. Now, if we look at, again, just the managed cloud, again, 24/7, 365 support. And that's a security personnel that are trained to watch for ransomware and intrusions. And it's funny, as ransomware is one of those subjects that seems to rise up every once in a while. Just recently, I was listening to the news, and they had a big article on ransomware in school districts around the country, because a lot of school districts have older technology, maybe even in a kind of on-premise world. So it's easy for ransomware to actually take over those servers and so on. Disaster recovery. Scalability, that's an interesting one too, because we see situations where a family office will grow, or if it's a multi-family office and they take on some additional families, they start to grow, and can they scale their in-house services easily to be able to add to the horsepower to run that? And again, on-premise makes it difficult to do that. A managed cloud makes it very easy. And the last point on there, I think, is also very important. In a proper managed cloud, you own the data. It is your data, and you can have it at any time, have access to it, and that's just the way that the services have been set up. And anybody who doesn't tell you that you own the data, I would not work with them. In fact, if you look at many of these cloud services like Microsoft and Gmail, they cannot see your data unless you give them specific capabilities or sign off on them having the access to see your data. So even though it's in a cloud, in a Microsoft data center, Microsoft personnel cannot see that data unless you allow them to. So again, I think that the security and the reliability that you're going to get in a cloud is going to be much greater than what you would get if you were in an on-premise or a non-managed cloud.
So a couple of questions from the audience on this, John. The first is there a point, or at what point would you recommend on-premise over managed cloud? Perhaps at a certain size of office, or?
Actually, today, I would not recommend on-premise unless you had some specific applications that could only run on-premise. I mean, we have organizations that are very, very large running our software in the cloud. Cloud becomes very scalable, and it's very easy to have hundreds of people, if needed, into an application. So I don't think that there should be a size limitation. The economics today also long-term also kind of favor a cloud. People originally thought, well, if I buy a server, I buy it once and I put it in the closet, I don't have to pay for hardware again because I've got that server. Well, if you look at over the, that server needs to be replaced, and things like that happen over time. If you look over the life of 5 to 10 years of using that technology, it really does favor the cloud overall.
Interesting. And then there was a question, you talk about on-premise versus cloud, but over the pandemic, one of the biggest issues family offices seemed to face was the security of the work from home environment as well. So, how do you address that within this? Because even though the cloud is secure, you've got people maybe not so secure at home.
So there are really nice technologies to be able to make sure that that communication from home to the servers are secure. So, for example, a VPN technology, which is very common today, very safe, easy to implement, and basically what it does is create a secure tunnel from the PC that that person's working on from their home into the cloud where all the servers are. So that gives you, first off, a sense of security that nobody can see anything as it goes down the pipe. Secondly, most cloud services today use an encrypted connection already. It's called HTTPS. So if you're looking at your email, let's say you're on Gmail or you're on Office as a web client, it's using that HTTPS connection, which means it's an encrypted connection even without a VPN. So I think, again, the other side of that also is making sure that the people all in the remote have some sort of virus protection and some other types of tools. And again, today there's very nice, easy tools where you could have one dashboard and it tells you that all your remote workers are protected. And you can see the status of their virus protection and so on. And again, those are very easy tools to get.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to talk about another challenge that we see quite a bit in the family office arena, and that's communication. Quite often, again, kind of as David was saying, everybody's dispersed, they're working from home, and especially when we're talking about senior family members who are not going to be, coming into an office every day, or could be in a summer home or a winter home or so on. Getting communication to them can be key and important, and so we want to just talk about that for a minute, because that's a key component of making sure everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what's going on. So we have another polling question to see kind of what is your primary communication method?
All right, I'm sending that poll out right now. Let us know. Choose one, your main one: email, Zoom, FaceTime, and the like, phone calls, or other. Thank you.
What's interesting is during COVID, so before COVID, products like Zoom, while they existed, weren't adopted very well because people didn't need to be, they were more in an office setting quite often and so on. So if you ever invested in Zoom before COVID and watched it grow, it's amazing. But this is kind of giving you the generations of capabilities of communication. So email is one of the kind of the first. I mean, I don't have phone calls on here because that's kind of been there forever, but email is one of the first. Everybody gets it. You get it on your phone, easy to use and so on. The couple problems with email are it's not real time, meaning I could get an email sitting there for half an hour, 2 days and not respond to it. Not trackable. You don't know what I did with that email. You don't know if I deleted it. You don't know if I forwarded it to somebody. You don't even know if I read it sometimes. So email, while it's very simple, it also has a lot of limitations. Let's go to the next facet, which was, again, especially with COVID, we'd have Zoom meetings. Now we're in real-time meetings. We're actually seeing like this. We're communicating. We're sharing information. But once that Zoom meeting is gone, whatever we discussed, unless we record it, but sharing a document on the screen, how do I get that to people to look at later, without, again, emailing it around and knowing that they got it and so on. So while Zoom brought in a whole nother level of communication, it really doesn't allow us to share what we call knowledge or maintain conversations of information that we want to share. And then, so now what's been emerging is what we call a collaborative, comprehensive communication technology. And there's two that I've mentioned there. One's called Teams and one's called Slack. And what they are comprehensive communication applications. They can be real time, and they can be a single location for all types of communication. For example, we can have face-to-face meetings on these tools. We can have chat sessions where we can actually build a chat around a document or an investment or so on. We can store information for people to have access to it, and it's all in one interface. So I'll stop for a minute again, and David, see if we have any results.
We do. Email is by far the most popular communications method, 73.9%. Zoom, FaceTime, Teams, those kinds of things, 19.6%. 4.3% use telephone, and 2% said none of these. So it could be other options.
Thank you. That kind of fits what I would expect. It was interesting. David and I were talking prior to this about communication, and my dad came from Italy when he was 30, and this is quite a long time ago, in the 50s. And his communication protocol at that time was airmail. It was that onion skin paper. You never see it today. Super thin, super light because of the cost was based on weight. And he would send one letter a week to his family in Italy, and he'd get one letter back a week. And you fast forward to today where you could be on conversations like this with anybody all over the world, sharing information and so on. So we've really come a long way in communication. But I want to start to examine, this latter Team Slack type concept a little bit deeper so you can understand for those people who haven't had experience with it. So first off, we do have in these tools the ability to do, again, a face-to-face, just like we're doing today, communication. So we can set up a meeting, we can share that like a Zoom call would, we can all be on it, we can share desktops, we can share, screens and so on. So the basic kind of, real-time communication that we want to have is in that one application. I'm using Teams here as the example because that's something that we use every day, but Slack would do the exact same thing. So we have the actual video capabilities. But now we start to go to the next level, which is chat. Now you'll see on the right there a little bit, which is a chat stream. Now chats are interesting because not only is it a place where we can, go back and forth, but it's also a database of information. So and you can build chats around specific subjects. So that chat may be specific to something that's on the left that we're talking about in this frame. And so I can see it relative to what I'm working on as what people have, had to say. So for example, we see a lot of this where we have a family will have a new investment and they're thinking about investing in a new property. Maybe it's an income producing property and they want to let people, kind of review and comment and so on. So a chat room, kind of, you think of it that way, can be created around that one transaction, that one investment, and we will have the ability to have everybody review and comment on that. And then we have that as a database. So if I ever need to go back and say, what did David say last week about that investment and who replied to him and so on, it's now auditable. It's now preserved. It's not just an email that we have to go dig out of our email system to find out how did David respond to that. It's searchable. So it really becomes a very nice tool to communicate with. But again, it's just one of the tools. Another capability is, and we're seeing in here the Teams frame, but we're also seeing, if a little hard to read here because of size, but you'll see folders in there because not only can we have a chat around a document, we can share documents. So we've got an investment agreement, or we have a new trust agreement that we want to actually, store in a location, get comments on, even track revisions. If people are saying and putting comments on saying, well, I don't like this clause in this or so on, we want a place where it's all centralized, where we can collaborate, where we can see that information. And this is still in the same product. So this is one product that's going to give me the option of working with video, working with chat, working with documents, and managing all of the collaboration around that, so that we're not going to have to try to go to many different places to find information. One of our family offices, what their management team did is they basically have trained, with some training sessions, all of the family members to use, in this case, they're using Teams again, and they're using that as their primary communication because they can get real-time communication if they want it. They can get shared chats and discussions around topics. They can share files and information and get chats around those files and information. And they can even go further with most of these tools and build in things like dashboards, applications, things like that. And again, we don't have to go into one place, email, another place for a meeting, another place maybe some sort of file somewhere, Dropbox, to find a document. That's one of the probably the overriding features is the simplicity of having everything in one place. If you're not using a tool like Teams or Slack or something, I would highly encourage you as a just bringing the communication together for your family offices into one place. Another
So, John,
item that,
a quick question. I'm
oh, sure,
sorry to
sorry.
interrupt, but this one, there's a couple around this, but let me try to summarize. How broadly should this should this be spread within the family office? Is this, this kind of real time communication? Is this just for the family office, the office plus its investors, or the wider family? What do you recommend?
Well, one of the nice things about these tools is there's many levels of security in them. So you can have a wider audience and only share, things selectively. So for example, if I create a document library for a certain, like a trust, I can only let certain family members, for example, maybe an administrator, see that trust document. I may have a whole different library that other people can share. So the wider the adoption of it in your family office, the more benefit you'll get. But remember, there's a lot of security in there. So not everybody has access to everything. We can keep some sensitive documents, sensitive. And one more thing is there's ways of bringing an outside party in. So if you have a trust document and you have an attorney who's been drafting that document, they may also have access to just that one document, that one library with the family members, and they're an outside party. So they don't all have to be within the family office group, so there's again ways of bringing them in very easily through just again a web browser and right security and so on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect. So another part of communication, and we start talking now, let's say about, investment portfolios and information like that, is, real-time insights. So one of the things that we get quite a bit is the fact that people want to see things now. They want to see them immediately. You can go on your mobile phone, you can look up your bank account, your brokerage account, you can see exactly where it's at any time. But when we start talking about investments in other private companies, investments in like, I may have a Series A round with a private company. I may have capital calls that my team is administering and so on. How do I get access to that? Well, there's great tools today to be able to give you access to that information. And one of the tools that we use a lot is a tool called Power BI. Power BI is a dashboarding tool. But the benefit of Power BI, it can be in real time. As of the last time something was transacted, as of the last time somebody did something with an investment, we can see that. Because obviously the public, the brokerage accounts, those investments are easy to see. It's usually the other side that has, a lot of, our family offices will have, a series of investments where they don't have, a brokerage account or a public document, a public facing kind of a board to see. So this is an example of a Power BI dashboard that one of our family offices in Vancouver, in Canada, has put together to be able to give their family members real-time access to their investment portfolio and where it's at right now. And they break it out into quarterly segments, as you can see here, but it can be basically into daily segments if we wanted to, but it gives them access to that information. This is using a tool, again, Power BI, which is a visualization tool. And the nice thing about, again, something like Power BI or tools like it is I can actually see this dashboard inside a tool like Teams because it's a web-based tool. I can see it on my mobile phone. I can see it on my tablet. I'm not bound by having only one way of looking at the data. It's basically anytime, anywhere, just like my brokerage account or my bank account or a lot of my other, cloud-based services that we may use. But now you're talking about your internal investments and making sure that you have access to seeing those when you need those. And here's another dashboard that they had developed here showing their fair market value of their investments versus cost in the different sectors that they've invested in. And again, maybe some of these are coming in from brokerage accounts. assets that they have privately invested in, whether it be in investment properties, whether they be investments in private companies, so on. So, but the ability to have this available as one comprehensive dashboard, again, in real time, that's a key component today. I remember when I started as a CPA a long time ago, we used to talk about reporting cycles. And reporting cycles meant you would get your data once a month because that was the cycle. And so nobody knew what was happening to the company, the family office, or whatever until the end of the month. And then we would get all those numbers kind of put together, and then we would distribute some sort of report, and people then had a snapshot, and then we had to wait another month to see what happened. Well, today, again, with the right tools like this and the right technologies, we can distribute that information in real time as needed, and it can almost be a self-service where I can go to, again, even inside of Teams, I can have an object that says dashboards on there, and I can see that right next to the chats, right next to everything else. So it, again, simplifies my user interface, but I can see it on my terms, on my time easily. So I'll talk about another challenge, and this is one that we deal with quite a bit. In a family office setting, it's very typical to have 10, 20, 30, we have some with 60 entities. And those entities going to have various purposes. There'll be trust entities. There will be special purpose investment type vehicles. There will be, investments like, we see a lot of families we own 2 or 3 Airbnbs in an LLC, for example, foundations, of course, management companies. So what happens quite often, and this gets back to, can we see this data in real time? Do we have access to it? Well, when your system looks like this, which is a series of individual little islands of information, and this is pretty typical of a lot of the entry-level systems like QuickBooks and some of the others, where you just see one piece at a time. And people go, well, wouldn't it be nice if I could see our investment portfolio in real time across all of my investment entities without having to go into each one individually and have to try to figure out and put numbers in Excel. If I'm doing that, if I'm an administrator and I have to go out into each one of these and put numbers in Excel, I've just gotten rid of the whole real-time capability. I've just reduced your ability to find data and use it when you want it to only when I have time to put it together for you. And again, that's back to that reporting cycle almost. So what we really want to do is move into a world where we have something that looks more like this. All of our companies in one place, in one database, not separate databases, separate islands. And what that means is, again, usually with security, there should be very strong security in any case. I, as a family member, can access all the information, we'll call it as an organization, not just as individual companies. So I have the ability to say, I want to see my investments in total across my organization. I want to see my cash balance of where my money is at in each entity, in each account at once in real time without having to go out there into these separate islands of information. So having one organization, one structure in place, and again, I'm going to continue to talk about the security aspects that should be there. The ability to say, well, I have access to a trust because I'm, one of the recipients of that trust possibly, but I don't have access to other entities because I'm not involved in that. I'm not involved in that investment, for example. So security has to be there, of course, but the ability for me as a family member to have access to information, again, real time and when I want to see it is extremely important. And you can only do that if you have your entities, let's call them, that are companies or however you want to talk about them, in one easy to work with database where we can pull that data into a dashboard, pull that data into a visualization to be able to see that. So this is something we deal with all the time. And probably one of the first complaints we get when we start talking to a new family office is they'll say, well, nobody can see what's going on until we do a spreadsheet or we, create some sort of document for them. Or we have a lot of intercompany activity, So giving you a great example, we get tax planning. We have 8 trusts, separate entities. We have a couple of other investment vehicles, so on. And we start doing tax planning across the whole organization. My tax attorney sends one bill saying, here's what we did and here's what you owe for all the updated trust documents and so on. Well, I want to take that one bill, pay that attorney, of course, but allocate the cost to all the individual entities so they share the burden. Well, again, from a family side, they probably don't see that inefficiency, but the administrative side of that is I now have to do 15 separate transactions just to record and allocate those costs across all of those entities. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just put that bill in, say, here's the bill for the attorney, and here's all the line items that for all the companies, just one transaction, and then every company gets their share of that. So it really reduces the administrative costs if we can keep everything together in one organization and with the right tool set to be able to do things like that. Here's some of the things that you should be looking at: the ability to have, again, kind of shared information. Maybe I am paying that tax attorney from multiple entities separately, but I want to know at the end of the day how much business we've done with that attorney over the last year. Well, again, I can share, if I can build the vendor once, the attorney, and share them across my entities, I can do that information. Again, being able to share cost or information across so I don't have to keep being redundant and doing it over and over again. These are some of the things that we provide, for family offices. Consolidated financial reporting. And again, that's the ability to say, I want to see my portfolio as a family member, what my wealth is across the set of entities that I'm involved with. But the other side of that is being able to do operational reports. Let's say we do have, and we do see a lot of family offices where they have more than one operating company, or they will make payments to suppliers out of multiple companies. Again, maybe I pay the attorney individually out of trusts or so on. Well, wouldn't it be nice if I could have a report that says, what do we as an organization owe the world? Well, again, if you have little islands, guess what? You're pulling out Excel, you're putting numbers in there. An hour later, you may have something like that. But the ability to push a couple buttons and say, this is what we owe the world. Every entity, what their payables are, or every check we've cut in the last 30 days, we want to see all the payments that were made. Again, operationally looking at things, not just financially looking at things. So really the type of things that we like to deal with is efficiency and being able to provide that information in an easy format. So let's talk about another topic here for a second. And this topic is approvals, because another piece of what we see happening from an administrative level is getting approvals from family members to be able to pay a bill. Maybe we have a capital call on an investment, and we need to have an approval to make that payment. Maybe we don't want to make that payment, but we need to get that that rejection also. We need to have it documented. We need to have it in a way that I can have an audit if a family member comes in and said, why did you make this payment last week for that capital call? Well, do I go dig through emails to try to find that approval from somebody? So let's just take a little bit a poll here on kind of the approval methods that people use to kind of capture that information.
Okay, I've sent this out. So what method do you use for approvals? Is email sufficient, phone calls, or other? So let us know. Thank you.
So one of the things that, as we talked about emails already, is, again, it's not auditable and it's not trackable. So I don't know if something's happened to that email, someone's received it, if they forwarded it, or so on. Phone calls work great, except the problem with there is, again, I have no way of documenting it unless I write myself a note to say, I talked with David today and he said, yeah, go ahead and pay that capital call. So what we want to have is the ability to know where something's at. It's sitting in somebody's message box or their approval list. We want to be able to know who's approved what when. We want that auditable so that at the end of the day, if somebody challenges, I didn't think we were doing this transaction or this investment, well, I want to be able to have those approvals documented so we know who approved it and so on. And again, emails are not really one of the easiest or best ways to be able to manage that process. So David, I'll stop and see if we've got any results.
Thank you, everybody, for completing this. I'll send the results out. 53.9% use email. Only 2.6% use Zoom, FaceTime, or Teams or some kind of collaborative method. 17.9% phone calls, and then there's a large chunk, 25.6% other, which may be
Okay.
in person or other kinds of
Yeah.
options.
So again, getting to where we want to have something that's traceable, that is easy to use. That's another common aspect of it. We want it to be easy. We want it to be something that is not onerous on an approver. We don't want them to have to learn extra technology to be able to do that. One of the tools that are available today are what we call a workflow engine. So these are, again, cloud-based workflow engines. And as an engine, they can be configured to be able to provide a user with information in the fashion that you want to provide it to them. So what you see a little bit hard to read on the left is actually an email message. In the very upper corner, you can see that, who it's to. There's a to there, is an email message, but it's a very configured email message, and it's actually a managed email message because really what this email message represent is a database from the workflow engine. Now, as a workflow engine, we can do things like, if the amount of the capital call is over $500,000, we're going to need 2 family members to be able to approve that. So the engine can automatically, based on the first person that's responded, let's say, assign that to the next person. If they rejected it, maybe it will not assign to, because we've already got a rejection on it. It can say that if the vendor is a technology vendor, we want to route it to this family member because they're responsible for reviewing technology purchases. And if it's an investment, we want to route it to a different family member. So the engines are very configurable. And the nice part about presenting it in an email, so again, a little hard to see here, but on the upper left corner, we also have the PDF that the vendor provided. So here's my PDF from the capital call request, or my bill from the vendor. On the right side, you'll see documentation about what this was all about, and we configure that. And then at the very bottom on the right, a little hard to read again, are approve and reject buttons. So the important part about this is twofold. Number one is the approver is still using their email. They don't have to learn extra technology. They don't have to go out there and have some sort of special interface or even remember which web browser to use or so on. They're reading their email. But the other side of this is, behind this is a true database. And that database basically is telling us that this is sitting in David's email box waiting for him to approve it, or it's been approved by David and it's gone to the next step. It's sitting in John's email box now. So that database is tracking this. It knows where it's at. It knows the status of it. And based upon whatever the response is, it can then stage data or activity in our system to be able to make things. So for example, I hit reject, it may send an email message to the originator with all the rejection comments. Or if I hit approve, it may stage that to automatically be paid in the next check run that we make, the next payment register. So cloud-based approvals today there's very many tools to do this with that are available today. We use one called Power Automate, again, a Microsoft tool, but there are many others. And to be able to have approvals that are documented, that are auditable, that are tracked, but also presented in an easy fashion. That's the key here to working with a cloud-based workflow engine. And again, you'll see a few things here that we just talked about. So I've kind of wanted to introduce you to a lot of technology. I know some of you are using some of this technology, maybe not to the fullest, but hopefully we've opened your eyes to some of the things that can be done. Most of these types of challenges into adopting technology, we see this across a lot of the family offices that we work with. And our goal obviously is to help them to use this technology to the fullest.
So some questions for you. One, there's, again, several of these types of questions, this particular type. But while the idea of teams and other programs is great, we have many people in our family who have varying levels of comfort with technology or a willingness to use it. And several of these individuals are from the generation that makes all or most of the business decisions. So, any suggestions on how to incorporate additional technology in a way that does not exclude family managers and make it more difficult for office staff who have to help them?
Yeah. So what we've seen in practice is you can't just turn on a technology, let's say like Teams, send people a link to say, here it is. My mother is 92 and she struggles with her intelligent phone, every day. So yeah, so technology can be daunting. So to help her, we spend time with her and we teach her and train her. So if you're going to introduce a new technology, especially to older family members, you've got to actually have a program in place to help them learn that technology. You've got to make it easy for them. One of the advantages, again, of let's say the approval is if most likely they're probably using email today. Well, we're just going to teach them how to read an email that has an approval option in it. So it's very minimal change for them. If it's something like Teams, well, we're going to have to spend more time, but we now have just one interface that they have to use for all of these types of things that we've been talking about. And again, I can put a dashboard in there, I can put communication in there, but again, you have to back that up with a very comprehensive training, and almost sometimes hand holding for some of those family members.
And then kind of a look at the future. That this is the model that you're projecting here is really interesting, tying it all together. What comes next? What should we be looking out for as family offices? What artificial intelligence? What kinds of things will we be dealing with in the next few years?
Yeah, artificial intelligence is a very interesting area. As an example, will it start being involved in more and more of what happens in certain places? Yes. You'll see what the key to artificial intelligence. It's not like what we see in science fiction movies, where all of a sudden this computer comes alive and it knows everything and starts doing things. Artificial intelligence learns by having a big volume of data. Being able to see patterns in data by looking at tens of thousands of records. I'll give you an example. In I think it was in China, they have a lot of remote doctors who don't have access to information about reading X-rays. So what they did was they built an artificial intelligence engine for reading X-rays. And what they did is they fed that engine hundreds of thousands of X-rays and showed that engine what was meant by a fracture, what was meant by this, and so on. And the engine learned by having all of that data, and therefore now when it sees a new one, it can match the pattern and tell, oh yeah, that is a fracture, that is just a sprain, so on. So we're going to see artificial intelligence in certain areas, like, again, investment decisions can be augmented by artificial intelligence. We're seeing it, and we're going to be implementing it in AP automation, being able to simplify putting bills in a system, for example. Being able to, Microsoft actually has produced an artificial intelligence engine that they fed it tens of thousands of invoices from suppliers. So it can read an invoice and code it for somebody so that we don't have that old job of having to type in all the aspects of a bill before we can pay it. So that's where we're going to see it. But I don't think we're going to see it in a lot of more mainstream areas in the family office. I think that these technologies we've been talking about, Teams and so on, are going to continue to mature. They're going to continue to get easier. I always tell people how Microsoft built Microsoft is by taking technology and making it easier. By making it easier, they get more people on it. And so while Teams today may be a little bit daunting for some people, the next generation of Teams is going to be even easier and simpler and more pervasive for people. It's going to be able to do more so that we can use it for more things. And so I think you're going to see some of that become migrate to become a simpler, easier world, incorporating more and more into one interface. And that's, again, a key, is not having to, I think, jump around into, well, here's my Dropbox, that's where I keep my trust documents, here's my chat system, here's my Zoom, here's my whatever. So I think you'll see more and more of that unification.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks. Any final comments before we come to a close, John?
No, I want to thank everybody again for their time, hopefully this was productive. I would encourage you, even if you're at the entry level stages of looking at technology, look at some of these tools. There's a lot of information on websites, whether it be Microsoft or Slack or Google or so on, about what these can do for you. And again, they're getting simpler and simpler. So I think the days where we had to have all these programmers and all these techie people to come in, that's starting to go away more and more. So I would encourage you to take a look at it.
Excellent. Thank you. I do want to assure people that we had a couple of questions come in toward the end about would they be able to see these slides. Yes, John and his team will send out a copy of these slides, and this entire webinar is available, will be available as a replay for other members of your family office or family business. So I want to thank all of you out there for your time and attention today. And I want to thank you, John, for sharing of your time and your expertise on this. It was really an interesting session. It'll be great to see how things develop in the family office space with integration and bringing the older generation along, kicking and screaming maybe, but with great results. I like that. I do hope all of you will join us for future webinars, including our Lunch and Learn series. And in the meantime, I wish all of you an excellent day and a wonderful upcoming holiday season. We'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.